I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker tonight, Dr. Deborah Stipek. She is a developmental psychologist with interests in children's achievement motivation, early childhood education, elementary education, and school reform. I also learned that she has a Bachelor in Science in Psychology from the University of Washington. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Stipek back to the University of Washington.
Go Huskies, huh? I'm really delighted to be here. I did walk down the Ave, which I hadn't walked down in 40 years, which tells you a little bit about how old I am. And I noticed something quite different. I remember only bars, and now it's all coffee. So what's with that? What's the matter with you guys? I'm going to talk this evening about developmentally appropriate instruction for young children. It's a term that we use all the time. In fact, we often refer to it as DAP. And of course, if you have DAP, you have to have DIP, which is developmentally inappropriate instruction. Believe it or not, early childhood folks actually do talk about DIP and DAP. My guess is that in this group, we would pretty much agree on what is not developmentally appropriate for young children. Where we might have some disagreements is exactly how we would define or describe what is developmentally appropriate instruction. There are a number of observation measures that have been used that supposedly assess DAP. But if you look at what it assesses, mostly classrooms get a high score if they're not doing basic skills instruction. If they're not doing flashcards, if they're not doing workbooks, or spending a lot of time in paper and pencil tasks. There are not very many items on most of these measures that really say what good, effective, meaningful, appropriate instruction looks like. So there's still some controversy about developmentally appropriate instruction that is embedded in basic notions of what the purposes of preschool are. And I'm going to focus on preschool mostly tonight. What are their goals? What are we trying to achieve? And I'm going to oversimplify a bit, but there's sort of two camps on this issue. One focuses more on social development. We want children to develop social skills. We want them to use their words, to share, to help, to be respectful of other children and adults. Self-regulation. We want children to be able to keep their hands to themselves when they're standing in line. We want them to, instead of grabbing the toy instantly when they want it, to use their words again and use some kind of other appropriate strategy for that. We want children to be self-confident, to expect to be able to exceed, to engage in activities, learning activities with enthusiasm and confidence that they can, in fact, achieve their goals. There are a whole lot of learning behaviors that we used to think were important to teach in kindergarten, but now that kindergarten has become first grade, these learning behaviors really have to be learned in preschool. Things like sitting still for more than 12 seconds, paying attention, planning how you're going to do a task and persisting and getting the task done. Being able to keep yourself from being easily distracted and looking around the room and start something else in the middle of the first thing that you've started. There are healthy habits, washing your hands, brushing your teeth. All of these are very important things for young children to learn for life, but also for being effective and being good learners and succeeding in school. Now the other camp, and again, these are not simplistic, simple two camps and nobody is in between, focuses more on academic skills. Language, literacy, math, science, social studies. Young children need to learn about the world. For the most part, the field of early childhood education has pushed back a little on some of the pressure and emphasis on academic skills for young children. This is really understandable. Most of us don't want to happen in preschool what happened in K-12. We do not want the kind of accountability, rigid standards, prescripted curriculum that we've seen in K-12 to be imposed on little kids. Some of us don't particularly like it on big kids, but in little kids it even seems more unacceptable. So there's been a kind of no. Preschool is not about basic skills. Preschool is about all those other things that we've been talking about. Now, I'm making this as though everyone is in one camp or the other. Almost everybody is a little bit in both camps. So really, it's how much you emphasize as your goal for early childhood education, these sort of social developmental kinds of things versus the more academic things. I'm going to try to convince you that we, as a field, probably need to take the academic skills a little more seriously than we have, and that we shouldn't resist, but we should find a way to do it so that it is developmentally appropriate and it does have positive consequences for children. So here's some data that I want to share with you that I hope will convince you, and it shouldn't be completely unfamiliar to you. This is a study that I did with some students quite a few years ago, where we assessed children's skills in a variety of preschools. Some of the kids were from middle and upper middle income families. Some of the kids were from very low income families. And what you see is what we see in virtually any study that looks at the achievement gap, is that the children who come from very low income families are performing at a much lower level in basic skills than children who come from more affluent families. So notice that in math here, the middle income 4- and 5-year-olds who are in preschool are performing at about the same level as the low income 5- and 6-year-olds who are in kindergarten. So they're a year older, but they're performing at about the same level. Literacy, the gap is sort of breathtaking. The middle income preschoolers have literacy skills that are significantly above the low income kids who are a year older. So it's a big gap, and it's something that we need to be concerned about. It shows up not just in basic skills, but in just about every cognitive measure that we have given children. We have found this gap, that the kids who come from middle income and more affluent families have more cognitive skills than children who are brought up in poverty or from low income families. And the other thing about this is that it's stable. It's, in the best of all possible worlds, you might think, well, okay, so they don't start out so well, but they haven't really gone into formal schooling. So once they get into kindergarten, once they're really into a formal, structured educational environment, they'll catch up, but they don't. What this shows is just in math is that children at the far left, you see what skills had when they entered kindergarten and then tested, and this is a national sample, it's not my little convenience sample, but as they're tested year after year, progressing through to the 8th grade, it's essentially a picture of the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. The better you start out, the more you learn. So not only do we have a huge achievement gap at the beginning of kindergarten when kids are entering school, but that gap is stable for the most part. Now that doesn't, obviously these are means and there are lots of kids who are moving around, but on average, this is the picture that we have. So let's say, just to humor me, that I've convinced you that we do need to pay attention to academics. We do need to pay attention to basic skills, because otherwise there are a lot of children who are starting kindergarten at a very significant disadvantage. So then the question is, how? How do we teach basic skills? How do we help any child, and perhaps especially children who come from disadvantaged backgrounds, how do we help them develop skills? And again, I'm going to oversimplify and create more or less two different camps. On the one side, and my guess is that most of the people in this room subscribe or tend to subscribe to this camp, which is a basic view of learning, which requires children to engage actively with the world. Sometimes it's referred to as constructivists. It comes from Piaget's theory, although it didn't start with Piaget's theory, but it's the idea that learning and knowledge and understanding are developed through actions, through interactions with the real world. So children need to be involved in direct experience with the real world. They need diverse activities so that they have lots of different experiences. And there is an assumption that children should be able to choose a lot of the activities that they engage in, and a belief, for which there's a little bit of evidence, that they are likely to choose the most productive kinds of activities, the kinds of challenges that will help them develop to the next level. It's not about getting the right answer. It's about the process. It's about the activity. It's about the engaging with real materials. And you notice that I bolded play, because play is like the, I don't know what to call it, play's everything. Children need to play. And many of us who are very concerned about the emphasis on basic skills in a way that we don't necessarily feel comfortable, we're passionately saying, but they need to play. You know what? We all need to play. I need to play. But one of the questions is, what do we mean by play? And I hope that by the end of this talk, I've made you scratch your head and say at least, gee, I'm not sure what we do mean by play, because there are a lot of ways of thinking about what play is. But play is the golden goal in preschools that subscribe to this general view of how children learn. On the other side, which embedded more in a learning theory, the assumption that there are specific things that children need to learn, and they need to learn them in a particular sequence, and they need to be taught them. No amount of exploration and natural inquiry and engaging in activities, self-directed activities, is going to actually lead them to construct all of the knowledge that they need to be successful, even in kindergarten, let alone in life. And so under this theory, teachers need to teach. Children need very specific kinds of directed instruction. You don't need as diverse in activities, and you can't let children choose everything they do, because they don't know what they're supposed to learn. Only the teacher knows what they're supposed to learn. They don't know what sequence they're supposed to learn it in. Only the teacher does. So it puts the teacher in a very central role, and it's a very different view of what a preschool might look like. In a way, these two camps, and again, I really want to emphasize that even though I'm describing them as though they were two camps, most people are a mixture of the two. But it makes it easier to make them sound like they're two different camps. And actually, in some of the debates, you'd think that they were. I mean, some of these debates, you know, not quite the Republicans and the Democrats, but it has a flavor of some of those discussions. It's a very different view of what the role of the teacher is. In programs where the teachers subscribe to a kind of constructivist approach to early childhood education, they view their role and the kind of things that they actually do are more what I'm referring to as facilitator. They're managing the classroom, and they're more like a parent. A lot of nurturing, they're supportive, they're making sure that it's a safe environment. They're engaging them in conversations about their feelings and things like that. Remember that children need to engage directly with materials to construct knowledge. They're putting materials out. So I'm sure all of you who've visited a preschool have seen centers, tables on which there are different activities. There may be a finger painting place, there may be a math activity with something that you can count or sort shapes or something like that. And the kids move from table to table, but the teacher's role is pretty much to make sure that the materials are there, make sure that kids aren't bopping each other over the head and that they're safe, and observing and troubleshooting. But they're not teaching, they're not engaging the kids very much. And in fact, there are people who say, if you engage the kids, if you kind of insert yourself in those learning environments, you're going to undermine their learning, because they're going to undermine their natural disposition and desire to learn. You're going to take away their creativity. You're going to undermine their intrinsic motivation. It's going to be about you instead of them. And so there's actually a lot of sort of a belief that intervening is bad. On the other hand, intervening is good if you subscribe to a much more teacher-directed, the goal of preschool is to learn basic skills. I know what skills they need to learn. I know what sequence they need to learn them in, and I'm going to engage directly with them and make sure that they learn them. I'm in control here. Very different view of what the teacher does. So I'm not thrilled with either of these views, and I'm going to try to propose and illustrate a sort of a third metaphor for the role of the teacher. So let's talk first about the sort of facilitator, manager, constructivist view of what a teacher does. One complaint that some people who propose or support direct instruction have of that is that kids aren't going to discover on their own everything you want them to discover. They're not going to discover all the letter-sound relationships that they could know and should know when they get to kindergarten. They may not even discover how to write their name. I mean, there are some basic skills, or to count to 10, or to understand what 10 means. Although that direct experience may give them some, what Vygotsky refers to as spontaneous knowledge, they need the scientific knowledge. And all the free play in the world is not going to give them all the things that they need to learn. So it's good in the sense that it is motivating and kids enjoy it, but it has limitations in the sense that kids aren't going to construct or develop on their own all the things that we want to. So I want to show you a videotape of Armando engaged with a friend in free play, and then we'll talk about what some of the limitations are.
But it's up to you and me, buddy. Mother, you can hold that. Sit down now. I really believe it. What else are gonna take to me? Well, how about if it don't reach? I can't reach it. Okay. Like that, okay? Okay. Now you can reach it? Yeah, now I can reach it. Here, buddy. We need 2 more. I mean 3 more. There's something under there. This. Here, we need 2 more now. Now we still need 2 more. We need 1 more. Oh, 2 more and 1 more. You were right, 2 more. Uh-huh. You was right. I was right, 2 more. You was right. Finish. Well, we gotta cover these up, right? We gotta put something in here. Oh, you remember yesterday and we put peoples in here? Mm-hmm. You wanna make that again? Yeah. You wanna put some people? Whoa. Wait. Keep me. Aren't we gonna need? Oh yeah. Put that there. Now give me the guinea one. Give me the guinea one. Cause there's gonna be 2 more left, and we're not gonna. Yeah. So we gotta do the skinny one, right? Yeah. Cause there's gonna be 2 more left. to make it. No, I got it, Armando. I got it. Okay, I'm not gonna touch it. Hey, you got the gun. I don't tell it. That's like the little poopy dude that he said, I don't tell it. This looks cool. Okay. Okay, light on, light off, light on, light on. That's it. That's it. No, how come? We're doing a lot of work here, right? I hope. Oh, we need 2. Or maybe we need 3. Oh, yeah.
I got to tell you that I started with that video and then figured out what kind of talk I could do around it because that video is so much fun. So your dream play session, free play session, right? So you've got all kinds of practicing of social emotional skills, social skills, leadership skills for Armando. He's clearly rehearsing to be, I don't know, something. You have negotiation, turn-taking, communication. So you've got a lot of kind of practicing of collaboration and cooperation and things like that that are important social, emotional life skills. But you also have a lot of math in there. Estimation, math language, skinny, spatial concepts, it doesn't reach, number concepts. So here you've got a free play situation where there's just a lot going on, and I think for most people who are really endorsing free play, you can see why they would endorse it. On the other hand, nothing was pushing them to the next step. They only went up as high as 3. That was the highest number they used. Well, kids should probably get to kindergarten being able to count higher than 3. Now, that doesn't mean they can't. It's just mean that that's all we saw, so we don't know what they're actually able to do. So they use the vocabulary that they already have. So then the question is, well, what if we want them to expand their math vocabulary? Can we depend on free play opportunities for them to do that? Well, probably not. And the interesting thing is I gave a talk and used my Armando tape to a group of preschool teachers a while ago, and I said, now what are some of the ways that a teacher might have entered into that play period? Let them decide what they want to do. So it was a child-chosen activity, but really pushed a little some of the math language and some of the mathematics and intervened. Well, the response I got was, you would have completely ruined it. You would have, it was spontaneous, they were engaged, they were excited, they were enthusiastic, and the minute the teacher walked in there, the whole thing would have fallen flat and the kids would have walked away. I don't know if that's true. I really don't know for sure. But I do think that we can't rely on free play to teach everything that we want children to know by the time they go to kindergarten. But I'm not any happier with some of the kind of structured teaching that I have seen that comes from what you might, the other side of the slide, the more learning, more direct teaching approach. In fact, I just want to show some data, again from a study that was done quite a while ago. We observed classrooms that were very much play-like classrooms, lots of free play, very child-centered classrooms. They'd get scores off the charts on developmentally appropriate instruction using the measures that I talked about. We compared those to classrooms that were a lot of teacher-directed activity. We did see flashcards in these classrooms. We did see a lot of paper and pencil tasks where there were right or wrong answers. In one of the classrooms we even saw, not only did kids get smiley faces stamped on their paper when they got the right answers, but they got a frown face stamped on it when they got wrong answers. I mean, that sort of, we had to do therapy with my students after they came back from that one, because that just doesn't fit with our view of what developmentally appropriate instruction should look like. We compared in our observations, in our work with the children, we compared the children who were in the more, what did I call them here, teacher-directed classrooms, and the children who were in the more child-centered classrooms. And what we found, as we had predicted, was that claims about undermining children's motivation by very strong, basic skills-oriented, teacher-directed instruction actually happened in this study. What we found was the children in the more direct teaching classrooms rated their ability lower. Now notice that they didn't rate it low. I have found in years of research that it's very hard to discourage young children. They do have very strong views of their abilities, and it's as much as we've tried to beat them down, it hasn't, but these classrooms beat them down a little bit, and significantly so. When we gave them an array of activities that were clearly differentiated by the difficulty level, the children who were in the more teacher-directed classrooms were selected an easier level task when we said, which one of these 7 puzzles do you want to do? When we asked them, same thing, setting an array of different levels of difficulty in front of them, which puzzle or maze they thought they'd be able to accomplish, the children from the teacher-directed classrooms were more modest in their expectations. Now, I can't say that we've completely screwed up these kids, because this evidence doesn't show them, but it does screwed up, but it does show them, because I didn't have a measure of screwed up, but it does show that it does have an effect, that it does have an effect on their motivation, and it's conceivable that it could have an effect that would have long-term negative implications. When we looked at the kids in the classroom, we also saw differences in behaviors and things that would potentially be worrisome. Non-compliance was extremely high in the teacher-directed classroom. Now, one of the reasons you see a lot more non-compliance in a teacher-directed classroom is there are a lot more ways to non-comply. There are a lot more things you have to comply with. If you're basically allowed to play with whatever you want to play with, or the only restrictions are you're indoors or outdoors, or only 4 people can play here at the same time, you don't have too many ways in which you can get into trouble. But if you have all the kids who are supposed to do exactly the same thing at the same time, then there are lots of ways to not do what you're told. And I'll just give you an example of what I think was going on. There was one classroom where the teacher did a demonstration of how to write a B for boy. Kids had, remember that line paper, the 3-line, the dotted line in the middle, and we had them in kindergarten? So the task for all the kids sitting at a desk, these are 4-year-olds, was to write, I don't know how many B's, like fill up the lines with B's. So Johnny does a few B's, dutifully, stands up and goes over to the Lego table. The Legos were calling. Remember that attention and focus? Didn't quite have that. So the teacher gently says, Johnny, you really need to get back. You haven't finished your B's. And Johnny goes back and does a few more B's. And 5 more B's, Johnny's back at the Legos table. B's just weren't doing it for him. Well, you can imagine what happened. Pretty soon after the 3rd or 4th time, it escalated. And of course, you know where Johnny ended up, in the corner. So here's a situation where you have non-compliance and discipline. But it's like, is this a bad kid? No, I think this was a dumb thing to ask him to do. So the problem was not with the kid, the problem was the activity. So I think a lot of what was going on when we were looking at these highly teacher-directed classrooms is that the activities were just not developmentally appropriate. And we're going to come back to what we mean by that later. And so you had to coerce, yell at, punish. You had to use all kinds of strategies to get kids to do it that are not necessarily creating a very pleasant and warm, fuzzy environment for them. We found a little bit more negative affect, sort of embarrassment, like looking down, crumbling up the paper, hiding papers, things like that, nail chewing in the teacher-directed classrooms, which a few other studies have found. What we found a big difference was in requests for help and approval. And we just simply checked every time a target child that we were observing went up to the teacher and said, is this right, is this okay, look at my picture, or whatever. It was an external reference as opposed to self-satisfaction. One of the things that was interesting, I don't have it on the slide, was that the children in the teacher-directed classrooms actually were showing more pro-social behavior than the kids in the child-centered classrooms. Helping was a really common one, comforting, and having sat in these classrooms for a while, I think my research team and I, we basically decided that it was sort of an issue of a common enemy, the children kind of, don't worry, I'll help you, because they were banding together. I mean, we just made that up, but it wasn't, what it did show is that even though you have more discipline and more kids non-compliant, in some ways, when they're with their peers, they're actually even more behaving more socially acceptably than the other kids. So what that tells me is that this direct instruction, at least as we saw it and in the ways in which we selected these classrooms, has got some problems. It's got some limitations. It's not working for me. But neither is the kind of manager-facilitator parenting model. That doesn't work for me either, because I think they're not going to learn as much as they need to learn. So what is our metaphor? What is our model for the role of the teacher? Well, I kind of like teacher as coach is what I'm going to push. It's partly because I can illustrate it very visually, but partly because I think good coaches engage in the kind of teaching behavior that I would like to see preschool teachers engage in. So what do good coaches do? Well, for one thing, they do pay attention to social-emotional development, being a good team member, sportsmanship, cooperation, collaboration. I know when I taught swimming when I was at the University of Washington, that's how I paid my $500 a year tuition. It's gone up. I made sure that the children knew that they were not supposed to splash water in other kids' faces, and they're not supposed to hit other kids over the head with the kickboard. As I'm assuming a baseball coach or teacher would also make sure that kids didn't learn not to hit each other over the head with a baseball bat. So there is a lot of emphasis in good coaching and good teaching of social skills and that sort of thing. So, but they're also teaching skills, a clearly well-defined set of skills, and that have a sequence. I'm going to use swimming as an example because that's what I did. I'm a little hesitant to do that because my nephew Clint, who would have been the star swimmer on the University of Washington swim team if they hadn't dropped the whole team, is going to think that I'm all wrong and I'm old-fashioned in the way I taught swimming. But, so here's my examples. What do good teachers do? What do good coaches do? One, they model, all right? So I'm teaching the crawl and I say, okay, this is what I want you to do. Is that right, Clint? Sort of in the ballpark? This is what I want you to do. I want you to do that. And they teach specifically, I want you to bring your elbow up first. The first thing out of the water should be your elbow. So it's very direct instruction. They give their students opportunities to practice. They assess how well they're doing it. Okay, I want you all to swim across the pool. I'm going to observe, and they diagnose who's lifting their hand out of the water first instead of their elbow. They interact with kids and give feedback, constructive feedback. Sherry, you really need to get that elbow up first. You're putting your hand up first. They intervene. They may intervene with individuals. They may intervene with a small group of kids. Sam, Jose, and Frank, come over here. I want to work on, I want to work on your kick, because if you're not kicking, you're not going to be able to. Your crawl is not. Your arms are not going to really help you very much. So they're doing very direct instruction in a way, but it's a very dynamic model of instruction. It's going back and forth between the child doing and the teacher teaching. It also builds in assessment. If I said to my students, okay, I want you to swim across the pool, and then I turn my back, what good would that be? If they don't, I wouldn't know whether they actually got the stroke that I was trying to teach them. So I have to observe very carefully, and then I have to intervene, because if I just say, okay, now we're going to go on to breaststroke, some of them might have learned the crawl, and some of them might not have. So I need to make sure that I got everyone with me, and I need to intervene for those kids who aren't with me. So I like that notion of thinking about teaching as a kind of interactive, dynamic process in which direct instruction might play a role, but it's a fairly small piece of the whole picture. So let's apply this notion of coaching to a preschool teacher's job. What are they doing? They're planning activities that have clear learning goals. In my case, it was the crawl stroke that day. Maybe the next day it was going to be breathing, depending on how well kids had mastered the arms. Identifying, designing, and preparing materials. I need the kickboards. I need to be prepared. I can't just walk in there and say, we're going to do this if the materials that are needed are not there. They need to provide some direction. They need to assess learning as it's going on. They need to provide feedback to students, whether it's academic tasks or on something social-emotional. They need to design individual and group interventions. They need to take advantage of teachable moments. So the kids may be swimming laps, and I'm noticing that Cynthia is, after the first 4 strokes, starts dragging her arms. So I'm going to pull her out. That may not be right part of the instruction. It might even be later on in the day during free swim, but I'm going to give her some corrective feedback because I've noticed something. I'm taking advantage of a teachable moment. But all the time that a good preschool teacher is doing that, focusing on learning, on very specific learning goals, they are also promoting social-emotional development. They're modeling appropriate social behavior. They're not yelling, for example. They're providing opportunities for kids to share, to take turns, to interact verbally with each other. They reinforce positive social behaviors. I love the way you're sitting quietly listening. They are providing opportunities for kids to learn emotional terms, to identify emotions, to manage emotions. They're doing that in a way that is all interwoven during the day. It is not that we are going to do social emotional development from 9:20 to 9:40. It doesn't work that way. It's part of the culture of the classroom. It's something that's woven in all day long. The cool thing is that not only can you weave in opportunities to practice social skills in an academic lesson, but you can also teach social emotional skills and knowledge in the context, you can teach academic skills in the context of a social emotional lesson. I saw one example, a teacher was reading a book about a boy who was jealous of his little sister. She engaged the students in a conversation about, have they ever been jealous? Communicate the situation, how do they deal with it, what are some other strategies for dealing with that? So she engaged them in a conversation, language development. She specifically and very purposefully helped them develop some vocabulary related to emotions and some problem-solving skills related to emotions. But it was also a literacy activity. In fact, when she opened the book, she said, this is a book about Sam. Sam's name starts with S. Does anyone in this class have a name that starts with S? So right embedded into what you might think was a purposeful, focused activity to develop emotional understanding and management, it was also a literacy activity. I saw one teacher who was having trouble getting kids to wash their hands when they came in from play or before snack. And of course, what kids would do is they'd look at their hands and they say, I don't see anything on my hands, they're clean. So the teacher she created a science lesson around this. And she had them hold some white bread, and a few days later they compared the mold and the green stuff that was growing on the bread that they had been holding onto with their dirty hands to ones that hadn't been touched by dirty hands. So, and then they had a whole conversation about bacteria and how bacteria can make you sick even though you can't see them and so on. So here you could say, well, what's the goal here? Is it a science activity or is it an activity to help kids develop the habit of washing their hands? It's both. It is not a zero-sum game. It's not that if you pay attention to basic skills, somehow you're not going to have time to pay attention to social-emotional development. The two are hand in glove. They work really well together, and we can do it all. And since I've studied motivation for most of my life, I have to mention motivation. Not only do we want to promote basic skills while we develop social-emotional development, but we also want to do it in a way that doesn't undermine motivation. And I've just thrown out a few of the qualities of instruction and activities that we have found in our research and others have found support. And I note that I say maintain motivation and not create motivation, because most young kids are really highly motivated. What we do is not motivate kids, we drum out their motivation. They come to school highly motivated. So our job is just not to screw it up. And these are some of the things that we know are ways to avoid screwing it up and undermining that natural motivation that they come to school with. So I want to illustrate now what I'm talking about, what this teacher as coach looks like, what it looks like to create opportunities for children to learn social skills while they're learning basic skills. And I'm going to focus on math for a couple of reasons. One is it doesn't happen very often in preschools. I mean, I have had to go back sometimes over and over and over to see any math happening. But, and here's just one study that Dale Farron did on a large set of classrooms, and you notice that math is done, it's the orange pie there, pie piece there, 3% of the time on average across these classrooms. Not very much time is spent on math. Notice, this is just an aside, but notice how much is spent in meal, nap, outside, and transitions. So we want kids to have food, and we want them to take naps if they need it, and we certainly want them to play outside, but what I have seen is a heck of a lot of time is spent in transitions in a lot of classrooms. So when teachers say to me, I can't spend time on math because there's no time, I want to look at just how efficiently those classrooms are being run. So math isn't done very much, and there's some evidence that I thought some of you might be interested in that you may not have seen yet that is very recent that shows that math turns out to be a much stronger predictor of later performance in school, even than reading. These are some longitudinal studies. The top ones above the blue, the second grade, it says second grade, is a study that Greg Duncan and some colleagues did, where they looked at children's scores on reading, very basic reading and math assessments when they entered kindergarten, and looked at how well they predicted children's performance in math and reading in third grade. And you'll notice that math predicts reading in third grade. Math at kindergarten predicts reading in third grade, actually better than reading in kindergarten predicts reading in third grade. The study below was done by some Canadians, also a very large sample, longitudinal study. And again, you see that math is the stronger predictor. Now, I'm not going to make a causal argument here, because we don't know for sure that if we teach math more, we'll actually increase reading skills, although there is a little bit of evidence that that may happen. But it does mean that maybe we've been overlooking something. It at least suggests to me that we should probably pay a little more attention to math than we typically do. It even predicts college attendance. These are kids who have persistent problems in either reading or math or antisocial behavior. And antisocial behavior and math are much stronger predictors of high school completion and college attendance than our reading scores, which is kind of a surprise. And these are fairly new data, and a lot of us are puzzling over them and trying to figure out what's going on here. And I don't think we know the answer to that. But again, it's some reason to think that we should be paying a little bit more attention. And this is a slide that you already saw. Remember that the math scores that kids come into kindergarten are highly predictive of math right up through 8th grade and beyond. So that early math mastery just might be pretty important. So what is good math instruction? Now this is basically a summary slide that kind of puts together some of the qualities that we've been talking about that are good instruction, and I've added that I've added social skills opportunities to learn. So if I'm looking at math instruction, I'm looking not just at how well is the instruction teaching mathematics, but how many opportunities do kids have to collaborate, engage with each other in conversation, help each other, take turns, all the things that are important social skills that children need to learn. So I'm going to show a few videos here that I want you to look at with the screen that we've been talking about. I want you to think about what is the teacher's role in these activities, and to what degree are they demonstrating some of the qualities that we've been talking about.
To help her students explore numbers and counting, Xiomara Sanchez started with a familiar story about a girl with a very long name.
We read a book, Chrysanthemos, in Spanish, because I have a dual language program. So we discussed the book, and I include the math language about larger, smaller, few letters, more letters. Then I gave every student a clipboard with 10 Post-it notes, one for every letter of Chrysanthemos' name, so they can compare their name with Chrysanthemos. Every child has to write every letter of their name on the piece of paper. And then they have to go to the board and place it over there. We always start with their name because it's meaningful to them. For example, I say, my name is Mrs. Sanchez. S-A-N-C-H-E-Z. Oh, my name has 7 letters. And then I can ask, I wonder how many letters your name have? And they have to do the same thing. While I was at the board with the students, they have to tell me the name of the letters and the sounds.
R.
And then we count every letter to see how many, and we compare with the other friends or with Chrysanthemo.
El nombre de Susana es más largo, más corto o igual al de Cabra.
Iguales.
Iguales.
And that's why they were counting one on one.
Todos.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Also, they were able to compare their name with others and with Chrysanthemos and see which name was longer, which one had fewer letters, or the same. We also have another activity with a small group where they had to make a name tower using Unifex cubes, and they love playing with that. And I explained to them, you're going to use the letters of your name to build your tower.
Vamos a usar un cubito por cada letra de su nombre.
And we start counting.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. ¿Alguien me enseña el número 7 aquí?
7.
It was nice they were able to use the same kind of things of comparing their name with somebody else to add more math language. They can say, okay, this is taller, this is shorter, and these are the same.
Que la torre es más alta. El nombre de Kale. Muy bien.
Lots of math, right? Numbers, one-to-one correspondence, math language. What do you think, Elham? Is that a good math activity? Okay. So lots of math. I'm not going to say much. Let me show you another one now.
Like most preschool-age children, The students in CC Blue Ford's class love collecting and sorting different things, which they do throughout the year. This lesson takes it one step further with something that caught everyone's attention.
This behind me, you asked me what this was?
What is it?
A shower curtain. You guys are like, what is a shower curtain doing here? So we're gonna do a fun activity, but this right here is a book. Anybody know what this book could be about?
Shoes.
Shoes, and that's the title of the story. It is called Shoes, Shoes, Shoes by Ann Morris. What kind of shoes? A ballet shoes. Wonderful. My lesson was set up to have the children do a shoe graph. So after I read the story, I had all the children sit down and take off their right shoe. Let me see everybody's shoes. And then identify the shoes by some attribute, like if they had laces or Velcro.
Sandals. Could be with sandals.
What can we sort these shoes into? What do these have right here?
Gray.
Besides the gray, it has some...
Blue.
What are these called?
And white.
Strings, or another word for strings is what? Laces. So now we have shoes that have laces. I think we can add it to our shower curtain graph. I love the shower curtain idea because it's large enough for the children to see it, and the squares are nicely placed where the shoes can go on there. I think it gives a good representation of the graph to use with the children. So we have black shoes, so put one here, and then the other ones in each square up underneath. It was very inexpensive, something that's accessible and easy resource. Sorting was the main focus, but they're learning algebra and data collection and analysis and graphing. All of that was in there. Let's count our shoes in each different column. Black shoes. Who can tell me how many black shoes there are? Can you go count them for me? 3. Excellent. It's not in the sense of what you think about when you think of older children, but it's those same skills, terribly for preschoolers. 2. Can you go find the number 2 carpet for me? My children love the activity. They really grasp the whole idea about what we can do, how we can sort out different things just looking around.
So notice that in both of those incorporated some literacy activities too, language and literacy. Were the kids engaged? But it was a really basic skills activity. It was really focused on some very specific math learning goals. I'm going to show you a third video. This is the last one, I promise, which is a little different in that it's a little bit more structured. It's a little more traditional. And I want to see how you respond to it compared to these two.
Okay. Put your boards down in front of you. Okay. You push them all to one side. All the way over, Caden. Push them all the way over. Okay. I'm going to make 4, and I'm going to let you copy my way to make 4. Broden put his hand over his other beads, like this, so they wouldn't slide. We're going to come up with some other ways. You ready? Here's 4. I don't have to put any on the bottom because I've already got 4. Will you copy my way to make 4? Good. Oh, good. Can you make 4 a different way? Tell me what you have, Jesslyn. 3. Jesslyn has this on her board. 3, and then what do you have on the bottom? 1. She has this on the bottom, like this to make 4. If you have this way, will you show me by going like this? Me too. Oh, and look, DJ almost has Jesslyn's. You've got exactly Jesslyn's with 3 and 1, and so do you, Priya, 3 and 1, and so do you, Lacey. DJ's is a little different. This is what DJ's looks like. What is DJ's? What did DJ have? 1 on the top, and how many on the bottom? 3 on the bottom. Are those the same numbers? Yeah, 3 and 1, and 1 and 3. Those are the same numbers. So I could just kind of go like this and turn my rec and rec upside down, and it's 3 and 1 or 1 and 3, same numbers. It looks different on his board though, doesn't it? Because he's got 1 on the top and 3 on the bottom. If you've got another way, will you hold it up and show me another way that you made 4? Or check and see if it's 4, Micaiah. Some of yours slid. What is yours, Broden?
2 and 2.
This is Broden's. 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. Does anybody else have that one? Me too. Hayden has 2 and 2, and Jalal has 2 and 2. Are there any other ways to make 4?
I got 2 and 2.
Okay, you had what DJ had. That's right. Let's try a higher number. Should we try a higher number? 10. Let's try 6. 5 on top. It is 6 altogether. It is. What does it look like?
4 on top and 1 on bottom.
How many on the top?
1 right here. 3.
Lacey, did you have that? 5 on the top and 1 on the bottom? Is that a way to make 6?
And 3 and 3.
What do you have, Arjun?
3.
3 and 3. Okay, I'm going to make 6, and then I want you to guess my way to make 6. Are you ready?
Okay.
Put it down in front. You can't do it yet, because I'm going to make my way first. Okay. I've made 6. I want you to make 6, and I want you to hold it up when you've made 6. And I'm going to see if you've got my way. Alex, what do you have?
6.
6 on the top, 0 on the bottom. It's a good way, but not my way. What do you have, Caden? 5 on the top and 1 on the bottom. Another good way to make 6, but not my way. Jesslyn, what did you have? What do you have on the top? And what do you have on the bottom? 3 and 3. Another good way to make 6. That's what Arjun's got. Not my way. There's another way. How many on the top?
4 on the top and 2 on the bottom.
4 on the top and 2 on the bottom.
Hey, I was going to do that.
She guessed my way. She got it. 4 on the top and 2 on the bottom. All right, let me do it a different way. Making 6 again.
Hey.
Hold it up when you've got a guess. Oh, what do you have?
So what did people think of the third video? Did that seem less developmentally appropriate than the first two? It was pretty structured. Yeah, some of you think so? One of the things I liked about it, in addition to some really cool math that they were doing, they're learning about that numbers can be decomposed into smaller units. She was laying the groundwork basically for addition, right? You can do 2 and 3, 1 and 4. I mean, there's all different ways of getting to 4, getting to 6. So it's really good math material. The other thing I liked about that particular task or activity is that she could see what everybody was doing. One of the problems in classrooms when you're interacting with kids is you only know the kids who are volunteering or the kids who you're sitting right next to or whatever, what they're getting and what they're understanding. And those kinds of strategies allow that kind of continuous assessment. It's easy when I'm teaching swimming because when the kids, even if I've got 12 kids swimming across the pool, I can scan across to see what their stroke looks like. It's a little harder when you're studying something like a math understanding. It's a little more subtle. It's not always as obvious. So creating these kinds of activities that give that sort of feedback can be really valuable. So let me summarize the points that I really wanted to make tonight. One of them is that it is not a zero-sum game addressing children's needs on the social-emotional development dimensions and in basic skills. That you can do both, and you're not taking time away from one to do the other because they can be very much integrated with each other. And you can do it in a way that does not undermine children's motivation. I think some of the classrooms that I showed you where we studied the motivational effects, they were undermining children's motivation. It was really boring. But as you saw, it doesn't have to be boring. The whole concept of developmentally appropriate, I think we need to really rethink what we actually mean by developmentally appropriate. There have been some fairly simplistic ways of defining it as not focusing on basic skills, as child-centered, as a lot of play, and so on. But we also have to think about what our goals are. And if we agree that it is important that children, particularly children who come from disadvantaged backgrounds, learn the kinds of basic skills that middle class and upper middle class kids seem to be picking up, then we do need to be self-conscious and be giving them an opportunity to learn those things. So developmentally appropriate doesn't mean excluding them. It means doing it in a way that is not doing harm and is actually doing some good. Here are my 4 criteria for developmentally appropriate instruction. One is, if you have to yell at kids to get them to do it, then it's probably not developmentally appropriate. And I know this is kind of a backwards, do we know whether it's, we have to observe kids doing it, but I think to some degree you have to. You actually try it, and if you have to yell at kids, and if you have to punish them for not doing it, and you have to coerce them constantly, and if you become, your role becomes drill sergeant as opposed to teacher, then it's probably not developmentally appropriate. Activities that provide children opportunities to develop their social skills, to collaborate, cooperate, share, take turns, listen to each other, help each other, support each other, and so on. That don't undermine motivation. If activities are too hard and children get really frustrated, then it could undermine their self-confidence and their feelings that they can do what is asked of them when they're in school. If it's boring, they will lose their intrinsic motivation. I mean, it looks to me from Johnny's response to doing bees is that bees are boring, at least for Johnny. Actually, they were boring for most of the kids. And the teacher had to do a lot of yelling at the kids to keep them doing them. Only Johnny ended up in the corner. And it produces learning. Those are my 4 criteria. You don't have to yell at kids to do it. It provides opportunity for developing social emotional skills, and it doesn't undermine motivation, and it produces learning. So let's look at those activities that we saw. Are they developmentally appropriate? You think so? Even the third one? I didn't see the teacher having to yell at kids even in the third one, which was pretty structured. I saw the kids pretty engaged. Now, I don't know how long they would go on being engaged, but they were pretty engaged. So to me, if they were learning math, then it was developmentally appropriate. Now, the problem with all 3 of those activities is none of us know whether it achieves the 4th goal, which is kids are actually learning. We knew that they seemed to be engaging in a set of math activities that you would think would produce learning, but we can't be confident. And we're too easily, I think, accepting of an activity that looks like it's teaching. We need to know whether it's actually teaching math, which means that we really need to build in assessment on a very regular basis to make sure that, in fact, we're meeting that 4th criterion of developmentally appropriate practice. Another word that we use all the time is it has to be meaningful for children. Developmentally appropriate practice is meaningful for children. I don't know what meaningful means exactly, except that they do it. So my view is if they do it without being yelled at and they do it particularly enthusiastically and engage in it voluntarily, then it must be meaningful. Sometimes people will define meaningful as it's connected somehow to real life. Notice that the naming video, she used their names. So she did create a kind of connection to them, which may have actually enhanced children's motivation and interest in the task. In the second video, they used shoes. So maybe that also made kids get more engaged. But I don't know for sure. I don't know that nonsense words would have made a difference. Might have. I don't know if some other kinds of articles that could be sorted on various dimensions, it would have made a difference to have shoes. Those, I think, are testable hypotheses that we really need to try out. And the best way to know whether something is meaningful for children is if they engage in it. So it's a kind of tautological definition, But I think it's probably, for me, it's the best definition, because I don't know what's in four-year-olds' kids' heads. And also what some four-year-olds might find meaningful and engaging and interesting, other four-year-olds can't connect with. So to some degree, there's some experimentation that goes on regardless of what we've learned in research or what we've learned in the laboratory or what we've learned in other places with other kids. So I think really the whole notion of teaching, we need to think about what does it mean to teach something. One of the reasons the early childhood education field has resisted teaching is that they have an image, or many of us have an image of flashcards and paper and pencil tasks. These teachers were teaching, man, they were busy, weren't they? I mean, they were engaged in direct instruction, they were giving feedback, they were very busy, very involved. They were teaching. But it was in a way that is more like the coaching metaphor that I was using before, which is an interactive way, a dynamic way of interacting with the kids and following up with where they are. And then the question is, what is play? So let me put this question to you. Armando and his friend were clearly playing, right? That meets all of our definition of play. They chose what they were doing. They were having fun. Okay, what about the shoes and the naming tasks? Was that play? No? It was play? Kind of play. So what makes that less play than Armando? Pardon me? It wasn't free play. So play, there's free play, and then there's play. So what the other two videos were, the shoes and the naming, were play but not free play. They were teacher constructed. They were basically, the teacher was limiting in some respects what kids doing was guiding their play. It was playful, it might be a better word. And by playful, how do we know it was playful? Because the kids were enjoying it. They were enthusiastic and they were engaged. How about the last one that was a little bit more structured? Was that playful? Negative. Not very playful. Was that, so you would say that's developmentally inappropriate?
I don't know if it would be developmentally appropriate by your understanding or definition of it, but the children did not seem very outgoing.
They weren't quite as, they weren't, you didn't get the same exuberance, did you?
Like they were searching to get the correct answer more so than
Yeah.
really being creative on their own. Or
Yeah.
coming up with things. They were looking to their neighbors to see who might have the right answer.
Yeah, do we have the right answer? So maybe we should think of it on a kind of a continuum where, but there are several dimensions going along. One is the level of enthusiasm. I would say that the kids in the shoe and the naming video were just as enthusiastic as Armando was. I mean, they were really into this, but more enthusiastic than the kids who were decomposing numbers. But I think the point that I want to make is that we don't want to get hung up too much on play as what's important. Play can mean a lot of things, and there are things that are important, like the kids want to do it and you don't have to yell at them to get them to do it. That there's some apparent enjoyment. So there are criteria that we want to use to decide whether an activity is appropriate for young children. But it's not play versus non-play. It's just too simple a dichotomy. So I end on a very optimistic note, I hope, which is we can create opportunities for children to get ready for school, to learn the basic skills that they need to learn, to succeed in school, and at the same time develop on those social, emotional dimensions that are so important to them, both in school and in life. And we can do it in a way that doesn't undercut their motivation, that doesn't make them less self-confident, that doesn't make them see learning as less fun and engaging and something that they want to do. We can do it. We can do it all. We just need to be creative and think about how we structure those activities to make them achieve all those many goals. And the one thing we have to remember as a field and as researchers and as people contributing to the field is that it is very hard work. You can't prescribe what teachers do for this kind of teaching. It's too dynamic. It's too dependent on what the kids are doing and what the kids are saying and how the kids are interpreting what to do. Just like you can't prescribe how to teach crawl stroke to 12 8-year-olds. What the next step depends on what they get, what they're understanding, what they're able to do. So it's an interactive process. You can't prescribe it. It requires judgment. Did you see the amount of time and effort that had gone into preparing those tasks for both the shoe and the, I mean, that was, they made the grids, you got the shower curtain and made grids out of shower curtains. I don't know where they came up with it. I never would have been able to think up those kinds of activities. So it's hard work, and we need to understand that. We need to provide the kind of training that it's necessary to do it. We need to provide the kind of support that's necessary to sustain teachers and to keep them going, to keep them learning. And as a field and as researchers, I think we can contribute by developing curriculum, by developing assessment tools, by developing videos that can be put on the web so they can see what it looks like. So there's a lot of work to be done to support moving the field from these kind of silly debates about whether you should teach basic skills or focus on social emotional development. And I'm depending on you folks to do that because I'm old and I'm tired. And it's you young folks that are going to move the field to the next step. Thank you. Oh. So I guess we have some time for questions. We'd like you to speak into the microphone so that it will get onto the tape.
We had a previous lecture, Deborah Leong, who talked about tools of the mind, and I was curious how you feel about that. And I also wanted to hear what you thought about the Reggio Emilia approach, the project approach.
Well, certainly Reggio Emilia is a lot of activity. I don't know it in detail, but it certainly takes on the sort of active engagement. I don't know how focused it is on developing basic skills. So I can't really speak to Reggio Emilia. The tools of the mind is, for those of you who don't know it, is really focused on self-regulation skills. It's focused on memory, attention, some executive functions that we have learned in research seem to be very highly predictive of success. But it does it in a way that's embedded in play, so it's not like they have lessons about how to pay attention or lessons about memory, but they teach kids to use mnemonics and things like that in the context of their regular day and classroom. I think the effort to try to teach self-regulation very proactively and self-consciously is very valuable. The effects of tools of the mind is still somewhat under question. There's one study that found some positive effects. Dale Farron just finished a study that showed no effects. Probably a lot has to do with how it's actually implemented in the classroom. So I think the effort is in the right direction. I don't know that we're completely there yet. So I probably wouldn't go on the market and try to sell it yet. But I like the idea.
First, I thought it was a marvelous synthesis of these two different perspectives. There are two pieces I'm struggling as I'm thinking about it to put in, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about how to handle these two other pieces. One piece is creativity and exploration. Part of what I liked about the third approach, the Rec and Rec, was that there was some exploration. The kids could try different ways of coming up to 4 or 6. And both the other two were very prescriptive. Very much there's a right answer or wrong answer. The first one particularly. These are the letters in your name. These are the counts. The other thing I was thinking about when you're talking about play is the mixing of kinesthetic learning with cognitive learning. It seemed to me that the reason the first two exercises seemed a lot more playful is that the kids were walking around, moving around. Even though the exercises were more prescriptive, they got to walk up to the board, move the shoes around the shower curtain, and that seemed to make it more playful, even though the exercise was less explorational, less creative. So I'd love to hear from you how you put those dimensions into the rubric you're working
Well, let me
on?
start with the end, which is the moving around. Little kids have not learned how to sit still. I don't know whether it's cultural or whether it's wired into them. I've visited preschools in China where the 4-year-olds do seem to sit still for some long periods of time. And again, I don't know whether they're wired differently or whether they've just learned to be more passive and quiet for longer periods of time and to attend better. But let's just take American kids as they are. They like moving around. And so if you can create activities that teach them math and allow them to move around at the same time, then you're sort of capturing what their personal needs are and at the same time teaching an activity. So I don't know whether they learn better that way, but they're less likely to get bored or go off to the Lego table. They'll stick with the tasks more if they're moving around. Frankly, I'm the same way. I mean, you notice that I can't stand still very well. So I don't know whether I think better when I'm moving, but it's just more natural and more comfortable for me. So why not make school as natural and comfortable for kids as we can? On the creativity thing, yes, that is a big hole in what I talked about and problem solving. So creating opportunities for kids to problem solve. And also, I didn't talk about the arts and a lot of other things that you can do in preschool that provide children to express themselves, to try different ways of getting to the same place, whether it's, I mean, there are just all kinds of things you can do. I just didn't focus on that, partly because that's not where my work has been, and partly because I really wanted to oppose where the debate tended to be. But it's a critically important piece. In fact, I'm actually doing some work in China now. The Chinese government has decided that, they've been deciding this for a long time, that the problem with their K-12 education system was that they're not promoting innovation. Or what they use the term all the time is critical thinking. And I keep saying, you really want people to be critical thinkers, because that's not the impression that I get, but they've been trying to get teachers in some places, particularly in Shanghai, to teach more open-ended, more alternative solutions and that sort of thing, because they realize, I believe, as we do, that it's innovation that's really going to move our countries ahead. And they don't think that their education system is promoting innovation, and it's not for the most part. It's promoting really good copying. They're having a hard time getting teachers to change because the tradition of sort of classical memorization and that sort of thing is centuries and centuries old. So now they've decided preschool is the place to go. And so I'm working with them actually to develop some high-scope preschool programs in China, which does put a high premium on creativity and exploration and things like that. And from my perspective, for low-income American kids, probably too little attention to basic skills. So I'm not against it, I just didn't talk about it.
It was really fun to watch those videos and see the kids working. The thing that struck me is I also have been teaching for a long time, over 25 years, which dates me, but those activities, the first two activities in the videos, were ones that I learned to teach kindergarten. Mm-hmm. And now we're being shown it for preschool. And they're the exact same activities. We didn't use shower curtains, we used garbage bags. But it was the same thing. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
If the kids are engaged, interested, and can do the task, then there's no reason why we shouldn't be doing it in preschool. If they're confused, frustrated, don't like it, they have to be coerced to do it, then it's not a good idea. I think to some degree we have underestimated the level of skills that young children can achieve if they're given an opportunity. And we don't want to do that. So that's one answer. The other answer is, I'm bothered, like everybody else is, with the pushing down of the curriculum, of kindergarten is the new first grade, preschool is the new kindergarten, primarily because the focus is entirely on math and literacy because that's what we test, and it puts a tremendous burden and creates so much angst in teachers who now feel like they have to get their kids to do things that they were never asked to get them to do before. So I think we just need to find the right balance and make sure that we're not pushing into preschool things that are really not appropriate for preschoolers to do. But they'll tell us if it's not. So I can't come to the conclusion that those activities were not appropriate, that they really should be in kindergarten by virtue of how the kids were engaged in them.
Unless we then test them afterwards and say they should be at a certain level.
If you say to the teachers, okay, this is the math that every single child should know, and by the way, you may lose your job if they don't know it, despite the fact that many of the kids that many preschool teachers are serving have huge challenges in their lives. Homelessness and poor nutrition and lack of access to medical care and sometimes fairly chaotic lives, crowding. I mean, there's all kinds of things that may interfere with their ability to really take advantage of the classroom. So that's not good. But engaging kids in intellectual activities that they can actually learn from and enjoy, and I really want to underscore and enjoy, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, I'm going to end there because we're just about the end of our time. Thank you all for coming, and have a good night.